The Clone Wars were a catastrophic conflict that swept through the galaxy, a war of unprecedented scale that left entire systems in ruin. On the surface, it appeared to be a straightforward struggle between the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, led by Count Dooku. However, beneath the surface, the Clone Wars were a carefully orchestrated deception, a grand chess game played by the dark forces that sought to reshape the galaxy. The truth behind the Clone Wars is a story of manipulation, betrayal, and the insidious rise of the Sith. At the heart of this conflict was the enigmatic figure of Chancellor Palpatine. A seemingly benevolent leader, Palpatine presented himself as a champion of democracy, tirelessly working to preserve the Republic. Yet, behind his polished facade lay the cold, calculating mind of Darth Sidious, a Sith Lord who had spent decades meticulously planning the Republic's downfall. The Clone Wars were not a conflict that arose organically. They were engineered by Sidious to serve as a means to end the consolidation of absolute power. The first seeds of this conflict were sown long before the galaxy erupted into war. Sidious played a double game, manipulating both sides. He guided Count Dooku, his apprentice, into forming the Separatist alliance, drawing in systems that had grown disillusioned with the Republic's corruption and inefficiency. Meanwhile, Sidious cultivated his position within the Republic, ensuring that he would have full control over the Senate when the time was right. The war was a masterpiece of strategy, a conflict designed not for victory or defeat, but for the complete subjugation of the galaxy under Sith rule. The dark secrets behind the Clone Wars extend beyond the machinations of Sidious. The Republic's army itself was a symbol of deception. The clone troopers, bred on Kamino, were created from the genetic material of Jango Fett, a bounty hunter of notorious repute. On the surface, the clones were portrayed as loyal soldiers, engineered for obedience and precision. They fought valiantly under the command of Jedi generals, forming bonds of camaraderie and trust. Yet, hidden within their genetic code was the sinister contingency known as Order 66. Order 66 was the Sith's ultimate trump card, a command that, when issued, would turn the clones against the Jedi. This was the culmination of Sidious's scheme. The Jedi, guardians of peace and justice, were not merely casualties of war, they were targets of extermination. The Sith sought to annihilate the Jedi Order, the only force capable of standing in their way. With the execution of Order 66, the Jedi were betrayed by the very soldiers they had fought alongside, a betrayal so profound that it shattered the fabric of trust within the Republic. The Jedi themselves were not without blame. They had become complacent, their connection to the Force clouded by their own hubris. They failed to see the dark currents swirling around them, the subtle manipulations of the Sith. The Council's decision to lead the Republic's military effort pulled the Jedi away from their traditional role as peacekeepers and plunged them into the heart of a brutal war. In doing so, they unwittingly played into Sidious's hands. The war drained their resources, tested their moral resolve, and left them vulnerable to the final blow. But the true horror of the Clone Wars lies in the shadows, in the actions and decisions that were never meant to see the light of day. There were atrocities committed by both sides, acts of unspeakable cruelty justified in the name of victory. Entire planets were obliterated, populations enslaved, and cultures erased. Sidious cared nothing for the suffering wrought by the war. Every death, every act of destruction served his ultimate goal. Among the darkest chapters of the war was the siege of Coruscant. The battle was a desperate and chaotic clash, with the Separatists launching a direct assault on the Republic's capital. It was here that Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, would take a fateful step towards his ultimate fall. In the midst of the battle, he was manipulated by Palpatine, who revealed his true identity as Darth Sidious. Anakin's descent into the dark side was not a sudden shift, but a gradual corruption, driven by fear, anger, and the promise of power. The Clone Wars also saw the rise of secret factions and shadowy organizations, each pursuing their own agendas. The bounty hunters, mercenaries, and criminal syndicates thrived in the chaos, profiting from the suffering of others. The Black Sun and the Pike Syndicate expanded their influence, while the enigmatic figure of Maul, a former Sith apprentice, sought to carve out his own empire in the Outer Rim. These factions operated in the margins, but their impact on the war and its aftermath was profound. In the end, the Clone Wars were a crucible, forging a new galactic order. The war's conclusion saw the transformation of the Republic into the Galactic Empire, with Palpatine declaring himself emperor. The Senate, once a symbol of democracy, became a mere instrument of tyranny. The galaxy was plunged into darkness, with the Empire's oppressive regime stretching its shadow over countless systems. The Jedi were all but extinct, and the Sith ruled unchallenged. Yet, even as the galaxy succumbed to the Empire's rule, the seeds of rebellion were planted. The atrocities of the Clone Wars and the rise of the Empire galvanized those who refused to bow to tyranny. The legacy of the Clone Wars would continue to shape the galaxy, its scars a reminder of the cost of complacency and the insidious nature of the dark side. The Clone Wars were more than a battle for control of the galaxy, they were a battle for the soul of the galaxy. The war revealed the depths of corruption, the fragility of institutions, and the pervasive influence of the dark side. The secrets of the Clone Wars are a stark reminder that in the pursuit of power, the line between hero and villain can blur, and even the brightest lights can be extinguished. The Clone Wars, as brutal and all-encompassing as they were, served as the perfect smokescreen for a much deeper conflict, a spiritual and existential battle waged between the light and dark sides of the Force. At its core, this war was never about droids versus clones or the Republic versus the Separatists. It was about control, manipulation, and the ultimate extinction of hope. Every battle fought, every decision made, was a deliberate move in Sidious's intricate web of deception. And yet, even the most powerful pieces on this galactic chessboard were little more than pawns in his grand design. As the war dragged on, it became increasingly evident that the Republic's victory was Pyrrhic at best. Victory came at the cost of moral decay. Each skirmish saw the Jedi drift further from their ideals, engaging in acts they once would have condemned. They sanctioned espionage, sabotage, and, in some instances, outright assassination. Masters and Padawans alike grew accustomed to issuing commands that would lead to countless deaths. The Jedi Council, blinded by the urgency of the moment, failed to see how deeply they had compromised their principles. In many ways, the Jedi became mirrors of their enemies, guided by a belief that the ends justified the means. This, of course, was exactly what Sidious intended. Take, for instance, the betrayal of trust encapsulated in the treatment of Ahsoka Tano. Falsely accused of treason and murder, Ahsoka faced a tribunal composed of her own peers, those sworn to uphold justice. Though ultimately exonerated, her trial revealed the cracks in the Jedi Order's foundations. Ahsoka's disillusionment and eventual departure from the Order were symbolic of the larger rot within. The Jedi's reliance on the Republic and its political apparatus made them increasingly susceptible to manipulation, eroding their ability to act as impartial defenders of peace. Another dark truth of the Clone Wars lay in the origins of the Separatist droid army. While the galaxy was led to believe the Separatists were fighting for independence from a corrupt Republic, the very tools of their war, the endless legions of battle droids, were funded and facilitated by the same forces propping up the Republic. The Techno-Union and the Intergalactic Banking Clan, ostensibly loyal to the Separatists, had long-standing ties to the Senate and were manipulated by Sidious through layers of intermediaries. But this duality ensured that the war was a self-sustaining cycle, with resources and power flowing into Sidious's hands, no matter which side claimed victory in any given battle. One of the most chilling aspects of the Clone Wars was the fate of Kamino. The cloning facilities were the lifeblood of the Republic's military strength, but they were also its greatest vulnerability. Sidious, through his secret manipulations, ensured that the Kaminoans remained loyal only insofar as they served his interests. He viewed the clones not as individuals but as disposable assets, each programmed to execute a singular, horrifying purpose when the time came. The clones themselves, despite their unique personalities and bonds with the Jedi, were living weapons designed for one moment: the activation of Order 66. Order 66 was the masterstroke of Sidious's plan. When the time came, the galaxy erupted in a synchronized betrayal of biblical proportions. Jedi across countless systems were ambushed and slaughtered by their own troops, men and women they had fought alongside for years. The scale and precision of this massacre were staggering. Temples burned, and children who had barely begun their training were cut down without mercy. Sidious framed the Jedi as traitors, manipulating the Senate and the public into viewing their extermination as a necessary act to preserve the Republic's integrity. The role of Anakin Skywalker in this tragedy cannot be overstated. Anakin, the so-called Chosen One, was a figure of unparalleled potential. Yet he was also deeply flawed, his inner turmoil carefully exploited by Sidious. The Sith Lord nurtured Anakin's insecurities, his fears of loss, and his desperate need for control. Sidious offered him the one thing the Jedi could not: the power to prevent death itself. Through a series of devastating manipulations, Sidious transformed Anakin into Darth Vader, a weapon of unparalleled destruction and fear. It was Anakin who stormed the Jedi Temple under Sidious's orders, leading the infamous 501st Legion in a massacre that wiped out nearly every Jedi present. The image of Vader, cutting down his former comrades and the innocent younglings, is one of the darkest moments in galactic history. It marked the final fall of Anakin Skywalker and the irreversible rise of Darth Vader, the Sith's ultimate enforcer. The dark secrets of the Clone Wars extended to Sidious's own contingency plans. Despite his confidence, Sidious left nothing to chance. Should he fall, his empire was designed to perpetuate itself. This included the creation of secret facilities, such as the cloning facilities on Exegol, where experiments in Sith alchemy and the creation of Force-sensitive beings were conducted in secrecy. Sidious was not merely building an empire, he was laying the groundwork for his own immortality, a reign that could extend beyond death itself. Perhaps the most sinister aspect of Sidious's plan was how thoroughly it crushed the spirit of resistance. By the end of the Clone Wars, the galaxy was exhausted, its people numbed by years of unrelenting conflict. Systems that once might have risen in defiance were cowed into submission, their willpower eroded by a seemingly endless cycle of war and loss. Even those who suspected the truth, like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, knew they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. The dark side thrived on this despair, growing stronger as hope dwindled. And yet, even in the darkest of times, embers of defiance smoldered. Sidious may have extinguished the light of the Jedi Order, but he could not eradicate the ideals they represented. The rebellion would rise, slowly and painfully, born from the ashes of the Republic and the courage of those who refused to submit. The Clone Wars, in all their horror and duplicity, were but the prologue to an even greater struggle: the fight to restore freedom and hope to a galaxy plunged into darkness. The legacy of the Clone Wars is a testament to the power of the dark side's greatest weapon: deception. What the galaxy perceived as a fight for survival was, in truth, the orchestrated demise of democracy and the Jedi Order. Sidious played a long game, and for a time he seemed to have won completely. But the cracks in his empire, though small, were there from the beginning, and from those cracks the light would one day shine again. The Clone Wars may have ended in victory for the Sith, but their story serves as a grim reminder of the cost of complacency and the enduring struggle between darkness and light. The war was never just a battle of armies, it was a battle for the very soul of the galaxy, a battle that would rage on, in different forms, for generations to come.